Morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the Trescon team and the World AI Show for having us here. So as Akshari introduced, the topic that we'll be talking about is how do we unlock the benefits of AI in the field of customer experience. And as we all know that organizations are increasingly investing in AI, the organizations which do not accept or believe in the transformative power of AI are at the increasing risk of being left behind. And Singapore, for example, has a very ambitious plan of being a world leader by 2030 in the field of intelligent and useful application of AI. And like this, all the organizations are increasing their sponsorships, increasing their business strategy, alignment with AI to support the adoption of AI. And today we have here a diverse panel. Though Akshari introduced the members, I want to specifically explain to you about their background so that when you have questions, you can ask to them about their relevant industries. So let's start with Dietmar. Dietmar comes from the digital banking sector, right? He's at the core of high-tech, high-touch business models for the digital banking sector, and he has about 18 years of experience in the digital banking industry. But prior to that, he was a mathematician, an actuarial mathematician who has statistics background. So he's done all that in teaching, academics. Comes from South Africa. So put your hands together for Dietmar, please.
Thank you.
And then next to him we have Sourabh. Sourabh comes from, he's the VP of from the insurance sector. So I was just telling him that we don't see people commonly in IT insurance. So, and I think he has vast experience in this industry. He's worked with big companies all over the world, led global IT strategy transformations for the insurance sector for companies like Dell, American Express, etc. I think we have a vast knowledge from the insurance sector today. Yeah, welcome, Sourabh.
Thank you.
And third, we have Ashish. Ashish actually comes from Standard Chartered Bank. He's more on the traditional banking sector, who's done banking for many years. And Ashish actually is a product owner, so he's from the business side. So he understands what the users want, what the business expects in the adoption of AI. And I hope you can ask your questions in that field to Ashish today.
Sure, no.
So welcome, Ashish, as well. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to go into the questions, and please keep thinking about your questions. We have about 10 minutes where we would love to have your questions as well. So yeah, let's get started. So Dietmar, I want to start with you. So you come from the digital banking sector, and you're up against traditional banks, right? Which are which are like household names for almost 100 years, and you're competing against such an established market. Can you explain to us about some of the use cases which you are using in AI to disrupt traditional banking?
Cool. Thank you. Obviously, one of the benefits that we have as a sort of new startup digital bank that's trying to disrupt traditional players, and as you mentioned, one of the markets, our first market that we started out, that we launched a bank in, was South Africa. The big competitors, they literally all been in operation for well over 100 years. But the advantage that we have is we don't have legacy. We can start off with new technology, and we can build data and AI into all of our processes. So focusing on customer experience and really building that into our process has been key to how we designed the bank from day one. Because the reality is, all of you that sit here, you've got a bank account, but nobody gets excited in the morning and say, hey, cool, today's a Saturday morning, I can't wait, I'm going to go to the bank, I'm going to open a new bank account. That's not the same as testing out maybe a new restaurant or buying new sneakers or whatever. So it's a grudge purchase. It's something you have to do. So really making sure you get that customer experience right is the only way that you can disrupt and try and convince people to move or switch if they already have an existing bank account, which obviously most people already have. To give a couple of examples, our customer onboarding experience, that was the one where we've put the most focus in. So in South Africa, all our competitors, and same in the other markets that we've gone into, like the Philippines, where we've just switched on our bank, all the traditional players still require a lot of paperwork. So if you go into a bank branch to open a bank account, you need to bring your ID or your ID card. You need to bring a physical piece of paper with your proof of residence, which could obviously come from multiple sources. And obviously our challenge was, how do we automate this? How do we open a bank account where a customer physically does not have to have any paperwork? They literally just only have to have a fingerprint or their face, where we can do facial recognition, and obviously verify their identity. And that way, there's many data sources that obviously has the customer's proof of address. That's where they get the paper from. So how do you build these partnerships with these various organizations that have this data to actually source this data from source? The reality is these companies, obviously, they're not in the business of data. They're not in the business of storing this information. So when you get that information, it's not clean, it's outdated. So we had to build a lot of processes on top of that, a lot of AI to sift through that address information that we're getting to actually predict where does a customer live, for example. And there was a news article yesterday. We launched our business banking offering yesterday in South Africa. Before that, we only had a consumer bank. And one of the reporters actually wrote an article because she just went through the process. And she said she can't believe it. Previously when she had to open a bank account, it takes 40 minutes. Now it was faster than paying for my parking. So it literally took her 2-3 minutes. She walks away with a debit card with her name on it, fully personalized. It's live, active, like any other bank account. And her biggest wow factor was like, geez, how do these people know where I live? I didn't even have to bring a piece of paper. So it's really understanding what are the grudge points of customers having to source documents and just figuring out how can you get access, firstly, obviously, to that information, and then build your processes on top of that, then to do the relevant predictions and present it back to a customer that creates that wow experience, even if it's part of a process that nobody really gets excited about in the morning when they leave there, and it's just been so different to what they used to. Just that trust and that positivity that you generate with a customer is a massive thing for us, and it's played such a huge role in our growth because it just helped us get up that trust curve. Because in banking, it unfortunately it's a big trust game. So the experience is one thing, but to move your salary and put your trust into a new organization where you put your heart and cash in, it's not an easy thing. So making sure you wow the customer and really differentiate yourself from the competitors it has been key to us and has been a great driver in the really strong growth that we've had across our
It's
different
really
markets.
interesting to hear from your perspective. You mentioned a lot about data, partnerships, and understanding the customer, making it easy for the customer on the digital side. And especially you guys are starting from scratch, right? Digital banking is a clean slate.
Yeah.
But let's ask from Ashish, who's doing this in the traditional banking sector, taking your traditional banks into digital banking. What are some of the use cases that you have? How do you disrupt yourselves?
So let's look at it this way, right? Whether it is traditional banks or the digital bank or any organization, we are all striving to ensure that the end customer is benefited from the process, right? And I think AI will be a vehicle or it will be a catalyst which will enable us to do that, right? In terms of both engaging customers, not only onboarding, but also engaging. From the bank standpoint, you might want to call it traditional, but from a bank standpoint, what we try to do is see what are the new avenues which we can engage customers with, right? So there are a few use cases. Onboarding is what he mentioned, but we have a wide range of products, and we have customers from in various segments, right? So we try to use that information to see how we can engage the customers, build more of affluent banking, and try to provide solutions at that. So it's like one size doesn't fit all, right? So you tailor that solutions to those segments, and then improve those upgrade or move those customers from one segment to other basis their needs. That's what we're trying to do using the AI part in the bank, right? So the focus is absolutely on affluent banking and ensuring that the customers are engaged through the right medium and channels. That's the idea, right? So yeah.
So yes, I will not call it traditional banking then. So yes, I'm a personal user of the Standard Chartered digital banking app, and it's wonderful. So going on to Sourabh here. So I want to ask you, how has the customer landscape evolved in your sector, and what are some of the use cases that you specifically employ in customer service?
Yeah, sure. Insurance, as we know, I mean, it's an industry which is a traditional industry, has been in existence for centuries. And one of the things is, I mean, when we look at customers, the journey itself, from the acquisition of a customer to the basically, when you look at the customer journey from an insurer standpoint, there are mainly two interfaces. One is at the time of acquisition of a customer, when you are, someone is buying a policy. And the second one is when you have a moment of truth, which is a claims. And apart from that, generally there is no interaction. Or once in a while, if you're renewing the claims, so those are the three. Renewing the policy, those are the three major stages when you have customer experience coming in. Now, when you look at the experience traditionally, when you go for buying an insurance policy, you need to submit and fill out like hundreds of forms. And these terms and conditions apply. And they're like pages and pages of forms which you need to fill out. Now, that was the story even 10 years back. But now when you look at that experience, that's changing drastically, because what we are doing from a customer experience point of view is you have a lot of databases which you can tap into, like you were mentioning, Dietmar. So which you can tap into, you just provide one document and that to a digital copy, and then you are able to basically get all the information about the customer, linking to the databases. So that's one during the customer experience, and also during the interactions. There is, like, for example, if you have a query, we use a lot of chatbots and conversational AI coming into picture, as well as even sentiment recognition. When you're calling some of the call centers, I mean, you have that element of NLP mixed with your conversational AI coming into play. And when a customer calls in, you can basically, as a call center agent, you can look at the modulation of the voice and so on, and you can adjust your tone, and you can. So those are things which are really happening on the ground, and the benefit is twofold, right? I mean, for the customers, the experience is great, and at the same time, for the insurance company, you are basically looking at the reduction in terms of your manual effort, which goes into maintenance, and that's a reduction in the bottom line as well. Now, when you look at the other place, which is the other interaction, is in the claims. So in the claims, in the past, let's say God forbid, you hit your car somewhere, or at that point of time, then you file a claim, then you fill a paper form, then someone sends, there is a survey, you take the car to a garage, and it has to be a panel garage, and so on and so forth, and then someone comes in. So that's from a survey. It takes, and the time was like a week or 10 days. Now, all that, the claim processing can happen within 15 minutes.
You're saying AI has helped you reduce...
You're using AI there, the models the models are trained, and they're becoming even more entrenched to assess the damage in a vehicle, for example. This is from a property and casualty point of view, so motor. But similarly in health or life, when you look at it, it's also similar, because what you're seeing there is, when you have the advent of the wearables, and in wearables, what happens is, and even in commercial, you have those wearables which basically are capturing a whole bunch of data, and that data basically helps you determine as an insurer about the risk of your customer, whether it is an individual customer like me and you, or whether it is an industry overall. And based on that, you can send signals, you can send notifications to the customers, and say that, hey, this is the challenge, we need to adjust, so that you can basically pass on that benefit. Even in the premium, the benefits could be passed back to the customer. So that's one thing. And then, so both from a commercial as well as on the life and health side, that's one of the areas where we are experiencing it. And there are hundreds of other examples which I can provide, but then the time will not be enough.
We'll come back to that, yeah.
But,
we'll hear more, especially I want to talk about the risks and so on. We'll come back to this in a while. I want to ask Dietmar, in your experience, what are some of the areas in AI which are underrated, has more potential?
I actually want to build on something that you've just mentioned on the call center. So, obviously, a lot of the focus is on the customer engagement layer. So a lot of people are building apps, they're digitizing their process and automating a lot of the sort of customer process through the use of AI. But the reality is, especially if you go into markets where people are underserved, like we sort of focus on emerging markets, also there the digital literacy isn't necessarily as high as it would be in a country like Singapore, for example. So not everybody is necessarily that comfortable engaging in a digital platform. Or secondly, the fact that we are a bank, it's quite an emotional thing. If somebody makes a payment to you and you don't see the payment and you really now need that money to I don't know, buy groceries, or you forgot your password, now you can't log in, you can't access your funds, it's quite an emotional thing. So sometimes people just want to talk to a human being. They don't want to go through this digital process. They're just not coming right and they're panicking and they just want to talk to a human. So the call center example that you mentioned is a really good one, where you can actually also, once again, have a fantastic customer experience by building a lot of these AI processes in the background, where you're continuously monitoring your customer engagement, that by the time a customer calls, you can obviously recognize the phone number that's coming in, you know what the history is of this customer, you can predict what one of the main reasons could be that this customer is calling in for. You monitor your agents, you've got your NPS scores, you know which agents are really good with what types of queries, so you can, in your call system, you can route that to the most or the best call center agent to assist this customer. And then by the time he answers the phone, you can already pre-populate a lot of the information that would be needed for that query. Obviously, you're not right every time, and then they would go through the normal flow. But we've all been on a call where you go to a call center where they're just like, okay, just hold on. We're just waiting for our system to load. We're just waiting for the information. Sorry, my system is slow today. Just that experience that you get when a customer calls in, the person on the other side of the phone that's answering already has some context of some of the errors that you might have experienced. They can see that you've just inputted your password incorrectly, or you locked your card at a POS machine, or whatever the issue might be, and they've already got the information at hand to tell you that a lot of that really drives customer experience. But yeah, what we've seen, especially in the industry that I am in, people are driving a lot of digitization, self-service, and sometimes forget about that human touch component. But even in that environment, through the use of tech, through the use of AI, by monitoring customer data in real time, making these predictions on what the likely reason is why they're phoning the call center, and just cutting down the call, providing the context to the agent to have a relevant conversation right as soon as you answer the phone. Is another area that you can really drive great customer experience.
It's very interesting
Of
how
data
all you're talking about is data, the power of data,
Yeah.
that complements AI in every use case. And this, I totally agree, definitely underrated. And think of the number of tickets you'll be avoiding, the number of hours you're saving for your customer care, so that you can employ these hours to other meaningful things.
I mean, the cost benefit, you've just touched on the fact that you actually need less agents because you cut down the cost to serve the customer.
Correct. And also reduces the frustration part on the customer and improves the satisfaction levels and so on. That's wonderful. It's interesting you touched on data, because my next question to Ashish was in that line. Data is the core of all your processes and everything, right? And how do you use data? How has your operating model changed because of data? Be it application of data or data privacy, what is your thoughts on that?
Data is everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
there's no dearth of information that you have. And with banks like us, where we are present in multiple countries, I mean, you have a lot of information of the customer. You typically, every interaction or every transaction that the customer does, we get that information, right? So having said that, it is also important with AI, there is cost efficiencies and other things that will come and play. But the word of caution here is how do we use that, right? And I think it's very important, and we need to be accountable for how we use that information. So the natural course is there will be changes in the way we operate, right? It's natural, right? What we have seen is typically the decision making has changed, right? From and have been seeing for last couple of years, right? The decisions are not experience based or leadership based decisions. It's more of data based decision and other things. So that model of decision making has evolved over a period of time, and which is helping the customers and the bank both, right? The second thing that also has happened is we have become more experimental with the confidence in the data that we are seeing. right? We are ready to experiment, adapt, change, sometimes fail and learn, right?
Yeah.
Which is a big shift from the risk averse models and other things that we were working some time back. So I think these are the two main things that have helped the bank, at least in a way. On the people side also, I think organizations are um, how do I say, planning for scale, right? There's a lot of hub and spoke model coming in. There's a lot of COEs that are
Yes.
coming in place. So you have organizations investing in that, right? And that's helping um, the countries or different markets to absorb that learnings and implement on the ground. So the COE and the execution teams are working closely.
Right. I think it's the
And
maturity that is kicking
absolutely.
in.
So we see a lot of maturity coming in, right? But are we there? Are we where we want to be? No, there's still a long way to go,
It's a long way
right?
to go. Right.
So that's my view on how the operating model is changing and potentially will evolve, and we'll be able to serve our customers better with what information we have. Yeah.
Interesting to know. Like I mentioned before we started, Singapore's AI strategy also is very cautious.
Yeah, very cautious.
Very
Correct.
cautious. So they take their time until 2030 to have impactful AI,
Yeah,
which is,
correct.
I think, the right way to go as well.
Yeah,
Right.
you start slow but start steady, right? That's the idea. Correct.
Yes, impact is what
Impact
that
is-
matters.
absolutely.
Right. So now to Saurabh, my question to you is: what are the challenges that you face in adoption of AI in your industry?
There are a few, and I can elaborate. I mean, the list can go on, but then I think the top few, which I see, the number one is the skill, which becomes a massive challenge when it comes to AI adoption, at least in the insurance industry, because simply the data science or analytics. I mean, that's a function, and the skills around AI, machine learning, not readily available. You're competing for talent with the likes of technology companies like Google's and Amazon's of the world. So I think that is a major challenge. The second one is around the data quality itself. So, I mean, when you talk about these advanced models, you're talking about a certain form of data. There's a lot of unstructured data. There's a lot of data, but there is a lot of unstructured data. Now, that becomes a massive challenge when you have to manage that part of, when you train your algorithms, when you're building those algorithms, it becomes a challenge. The third challenge is also the investment and the executive leadership buy-in, because you look at the return on investment, and oftentimes the ROI is not so straightforward, because it's not purely in terms of your cost benefit which you're getting, but it's a lot of soft benefits which you're getting, and it's very difficult to justify that.
Correct.
So, I mean, from the industry, at least from the insurance industry point of view, I mean, and based on my knowledge, basically, those three are the major factors which I do see as major challenges when it comes to AI adoption.
Right. Like Dietmar mentioned, right? He mentioned how the number of hours in the call center can reduce. These are small things that you can showcase.
These are not quantifiable.
But how much can you quantify?
From an ROI perspective,
Yeah.
not really quantifiable.
It's not straightforward,
Yeah.
right? It's also a mindset shift, if you ask me.
Correct.
The adoption of AI is a mindset shift, and change management. How do you make people see the overall value rather than the dollars and cents?
Exactly.
No?
True.
Right. You want to add on something?
No,
to
yeah.
this?
So to some earlier points, right? So what I was thinking, and as we speak, right? If AI is able to help us identify the intent as to why the customer is reaching us, right? Within the first 10 seconds or 12 seconds. I mean, not after talking to an agent in the call center or not starting the chat, but once he starts calling, right? Even before he reaches the IVR, if we are able to know the intent as to why he's calling, I think that will be a great win to help resolve customer queries faster, right? That's the whole intent, right? And then you can combine this into whole thing and do. The second thing that I was kind of, contemplating on is we need to have a single source of knowledge management,
Yeah.
right? Which will federate the same information through various channels, whether it is an email or whether it is a chat or a contact center, or in fact, in some cases, the RMs, right? You need to be cognizant that the changes are dynamic, right? Let's say the fund values change, the markets change, the portfolios change. You need to be able to provide that information to our frontline faster, easier, and that's where I think some of the things which we spoke about, which Sourabh and Dietmar spoke about, help, right? So in addition to that, right, there's some tools like machine comprehension and right, are excellent tools where we should kind of leverage, though they are very early right now. But yeah, because you store loads of documents, right? Everybody has their own version of documentation,
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
true.
that needs to be standardized to make it more seamless in a way.
Right. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. Industry standards. Do we have industry standards? Are people willing to come forward and put industry standards, make decisions on industry standards? What are your thoughts? This is no, because personal experiences, I've not seen any.
So so it is, so from a standard standpoint, right? I think banks typically, and sectors like insurance are also are well regulated sectors.
Exactly.
Okay. And we are guided by the regulation. Doesn't mean that we stop there.
Of your industry.
Yeah, exactly, right. So typically the insurance and the banking industry are very well regulated, right? So when these industries are regulated, it really is important that we piggyback on them and manage that kind of a standards, right? So you cannot stop with what guidance, because regulators will give you only a guidance. It's up to us how to do the risk framework and manage those and get to a standard, right? So that is very important in a way, right? So and fortunately the regulator and the banks or insurance have everything in common, right? We are looking at financial inclusion, we are looking at what do we say, customer experience and treating customers fairly, etc. So typical basically 2-3 pillars on which we work on. So I think every organization has their standard, but the guideline principles are there, at least in these
Defined
2-3
by the
industries.
relevant
Absolutely,
industries.
yeah,
I think this is an interesting point that we just uncovered, right? That there is potential for a global standard, irrespective of the industry. Yeah. So I'd like to pause a bit here and ask if the audience have any questions. I hope you've been finding this insightful so far, like me. Any questions, please? Yes? Please. Can we pass the mic, please? Yes, we'll come to you next. Any more hands up?
That's you. You have a question? I do have a question.
Okay.
that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll take you next, sir.
Hi, my name is Dina Lawrence, and so I work specifically in retail and consumer goods industries for Tiger Graph, as a matter of fact. So the question I've got for your sector is, when we talk about specifically the customer experience, how are you measuring the response of your customers to what you're offering them in the experience across channels, and what are the results that you're seeing with regard to how your customers respond to your offering in CX? And that's to anybody who would like to answer that question.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
So some of our examples, and there's different ways that we measure it. A lot of it, we use a lot of A/B testing, so where you've got parallel processing and you're measuring the outcomes and for example, the completion rates, or ultimately how long does a customer stay with you if they went through this process. It's not just immediately that they sign up for this product or not, did they actually end up using it in the long term. So doing a lot of A/B testing with different experiences and keep on measuring the long-term outcomes and benefits is one that we do. There's more traditional ones. The NPS score is a big one. Mystery shopping is another one that we use quite often in our experiences, especially if it's like a call center where it's sort of a human interface. These sort of mystery shoppers we find also quite a lot of value. So depends if it's a pure tech, then a lot of A/B testing and measuring the sort of long-term outcomes from the customer performance right through to the customer side where it's more NPS driven. Hope that answers you.
Yeah, I would add the same. I mean, from a insurance industry perspective, mostly it's around the TNPS, also telephone NPS or transactional surveys which you do, basically, which give you an basically a measure of where you are going and what are customers saying and what are some of the changes which you're going to make based on some of those inputs or feedback which come from the customers. Now, and sometimes you might not be able to make all the changes which are coming from the feedback. It could be an organizational construct, or simply because you don't have the right technologies or the manpower or budget to do some of those things. But generally, it's the traditional measures which we generally have, the NPS primarily, or transactional surveys, or mystery shopping. So
Maybe just one thing I can add is just something that we've seen, maybe just a learning I can share, is especially on when we do the A/B testing and we change a customer journey or customer experience. The sort of very early on or initial reads that you get could be quite misleading, especially if it's quite a disruptive change that you're introducing. Most human beings are quite averse to change, and your first initial reaction is, this is different. And so, the first day or two, you might get a lot of responses, which looks like the sort of champion or your existing strategy is definitely the way to go. But as you go within a week, 2-3 weeks, once customers have gone through it once and go through your new experience for the second or the third time, then they actually realize, oh, this is actually much better. I enjoy it a lot more. So maybe that's just one thing I put out there. Is when you measure these things, just make sure you have the right level of context of the information, and keep these tests running for long enough that you actually get the relevant results. Because sometimes you can overreact too quickly just by that initial response from a customer, and their response is really just responding to the fact that this is different, and haven't really even had chance yet to assess whether or not this is better or worse than we're used to.
Just to add a couple of points if we have time, right? There are two parts to this, right? One is to add to what all of us are saying is NPS and other things. But when you have an AI or a conversational agent implemented, right? There are a few things that I think you need to look at. One of them is what percentage of your conversations are going to an agent, right? And that is one of the metrics which will tell you whether your AI is working well or not well, right? The second thing is what's the confidence level of your response to the AI, right? Now, I'll give you a small example, right? Where is this branch located, right? It's a very vague question. Today, your confidence score on that intent might be 4 or 5. But how can you improve that? It's something that you need to relook at those intents every time from a low confidence and see how you can improve that. These are the two key metrics from an AI standpoint as to what needs to be measured, right? The third thing, which is difficult to measure, is how are you moving customers from one channel to another channel, right? Now, we don't want customers to speak to us, right? I mean, the agent, right? We want them to do self-service.
Help
right?
themselves.
Yeah. So one of the challenges that we saw as to why we are not able to measure that is because customers don't come and say, this is my problem. The problem is something else. They start with a different question. And the way the calls are tagged or the way the information is tagged in the bank or any organization for that matter is left up to that front line to decide what needs to be done, right? So you need to ensure that while that can be a baseline to start, but probably something like a speech analytics or a text analytics will tell you exactly as to where the problem is and what needs to be solved. The annual fee waiver question might not be because the customer is not able to pay the annual fee. He must be pissed off with the service. That's the reason why he's calling you, right? So through his voice and tone, like we said earlier, right? You clearly can identify as to what the issue is, and then you can serve the customer on the right channel, right place, right time. I think that's the key to getting that answer.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would still like to take the gentleman's question. We have less than a minute now, so we have to be fast.
only one
Okay,
person.
countdown started. So I'm Suresh Kumar. I'm at the intersection of payments, lending, and insurance. I have two questions. One is Tyme has partnered with the local business group in Philippines. How did you think about the data structure and who owns the data? And at the end of the day, how are you processing the data to acquire customers, right? That's one question. Second question more is to Sourabh about, from an insurance perspective, there's a perception we generally don't wake up and say we want insurance. So what is the role of data here? Is it a health score that prompts people to come and take insurance? But is there some kind of thinking going around to say what prompts people to get up in the morning and say, I want an insurance cover?
If we can be quick and answer in a
Yeah,
minute, that would be great.
so that's a very good question, and there's no perfect answer to that. So one of the things is, you need to basically, as a carrier or as an insurer, you need to have enough data, or how much is enough is another question, but you need to have the data to be able to follow the journey of a customer. And based on that, you can create the need for a policy depending on, like, let's say the events in your life can, if you know the events of the life of a customer, that can, and the messaging which you as a carrier send around that can prompt you to take that decision as a customer to, buy a policy. For example, let's say you're buying a motor car insurance today, but I have a lot of data in terms of your anniversary. You just purchased a house or something. And the messaging, what you send around those and how do you interact, that can help basically in terms of, one fine day, oh, I saw that email from this particular insurance company and I think this is the right time to think about this. So that's probably the only trigger point. That's not a perfect answer, and there's no way you can, that's an answer which a lot of these customer acquisition is a major topic among all the industries, not just within the insurance. But that data, the event, how you follow and capture the life of a customer, I think that's where the key lies. I know I went overboard by
fine.
like 2 minutes.
We are overshot by 2 minutes. If you can quickly answer and follow up later.
Yeah, I think we can catch up to go into the detail, but what I'll just quickly say is, as you guys probably heard when I was speaking, data and data sharing, data and partnerships is core to our business and how we operate. So developing these patterns of creating these, what we call these Switzerlands, where you can create these data environments where you can combine data without any of the parties being exposed to any personal data of any customer that don't have the rights or the ownership to, is really important, because you can train models and you can learn a lot of combined insights without having to know who the underlying customers is. So there's many patterns to set that up. The time where you really need to know is once you engage with a customer. And the one thing that's really key for us is providing that very, very clear transparency to a customer of why we're looking to get consent for this data, making it very transparent to them what the benefits of providing that consent, what we're looking to do with that data, and what they obviously don't have to do, like providing documents, etc. So just being very transparent to the customer what the benefits are, but then also building out the protocols around it to get these environments in place with all the safeguards that nobody gets exposed to information or data or identity that they're not entitled to.
Thank you for that. We were just discussing that 40 minutes is a long panel, but I think that's not enough. We can clearly see that. So we would love to take your questions outside later on. And I'd like to thank for your attention and thank the panelists for their insights and sharing their knowledge with us from the different industries. Truly a diverse panel. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone.